William Shakespeare once said, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep." In the case of Scott Falater, his stuff of dreams and rounded sleep would lead to murder. Hey guys, this is Dana, and welcome to Coffee, Tea, and Crime. In today's episode, JR and I will tell a tale, or more aptly, a bedtime story, about a husband who stabbed his wife repeatedly before finally drowning her in their pool. Falater did this while sleepwalking and had no recollection of the crime, or so he claimed. The state of Arizona, with its eyes wide open, would say different. This is the story of the sleepwalking murder. It's January 16, 1997 in Phoenix, Arizona.
It just didn't seem real. I'm not sure that even until I got to the police station that I was 100% convinced that Yarm was dead.
Obviously you think I did it. I don't know what makes you think that. Because I had a neighbor staring at you watching you do it, that's why.
Authorities say Scott Falater stabbed his wife over and over and then held her head underwater.
Do you love your wife?
Oh yes, I loved her a great deal.
The trial was a sensation, not because of the crime itself, but because of Scott Falater's defense.
Not to sound flippant, but I kind of smirked. I'm like, are you kidding me? Sleepwalking?
An Arizona man set out to convince a jury that he stabbed his wife 44 times while sleepwalking and doesn't remember a thing.
The Falaters had been married for 20 years with 2 children. Yarmila was a part-time teacher and homemaker, while Scott worked as an engineer at Motorola. It was another ho-hum Thursday as the Falaters sat down to dinner. Scott would later claim that he was stressed with work as he began working on his home computer. Yarm, Scott's nickname for his wife, asked him to work on the pool filter shortly after the children had gone to bed at 9 p.m. A seemingly odd request considering the time, but highly convenient if you don't want any witnesses to your story. But hey, who am I to judge? According to Scott, he unsuccessfully attempted to remove the O-ring from the filter, but was not able to finish the job. He decided to go to bed. As he entered the house, he kissed his wife goodnight as she lay slumbering on the couch. Yarmila Falater had been stabbed 44 times, and most were defensive wounds, but some were fatal. Scott Falater had put on gloves before killing his wife, and afterward he bandaged a cut on his finger. Police said that bloody clothes and a knife were found in his van, indicating that he had tried to cover up his actions. Come on, Scott, who are you kidding? So let me get this straight. You went to sleep wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt, got up, walked down the stairs, put on a pair of gloves, got a hunting knife, grabbed your wife from behind, stabbed poor Yarm 44 times, dumped her in the pool, then held her head under the water, walked back into the house, took off your gloves, blue jeans, and t-shirt that, oh, by the way, are covered in your poor wife's blood? You do a piss-poor job cleaning the blood that is covering your body before putting on some nice pajama pants and another white t-shirt. You bandage your cut hand, a la OJ, before hiding the bloodied clothing and the hunting knife in your van secreted in a small plastic container. Come back inside and hide in your room, hoping no one finds the body till the next day so you can claim an intruder killed your wife.
Greg Coons and Stephanie Reedhead live next door to the Falaters.
Greg and I were getting ready to go to bed somewhere a little after 10, probably 10:30. And then I heard moaning or crying or something. And then I told Greg, I think it was something outside.
What the neighbor sees is a body of Yarmila Falater just lying there. He thinks that maybe this is someone who's just drunk and passed out. Some time passes, and Scott then comes out onto their backyard. He then grabs her by the arms, over her head, and drags her to the edge of the pool. He then seems to roll her body into the pool.
We thought he was splashing her and trying to wake her up. And then I remember Greg running in. Oh my God, he put her head underwater. She's in the pool, but now he's actually holding her head under the water.
If your first thought about this case is, what the what? You would be right. If you think no one would ever be dumb enough to use sleepwalking as a defense, you would be wrong. Did you know sleepwalkers and other people who have parasomnias or involuntary behaviors they act out while sleeping are usually harmless, but parasomnias occasionally lead to reckless actions, self-injury, and even violence against others. Enter the sleepwalking defense, a legal argument that a criminal defendant isn't culpable because he or she acted while in a sleep-like state without consciousness or intent to commit a crime. In a Massachusetts case from 1846, Albert Terrell was acquitted in the murder of a prostitute in Boston. Terrell slit the woman's throat and set fire to the brothel she was employed by before fleeing to New Orleans, where he was arrested. His lawyer claimed Terrell was a chronic sleepwalker and committed the crime while asleep. The jury found him not guilty. The Terrell case was thought to be the first U.S. case in which the sleepwalking defense was successfully used. In the 1870s, a man named Fane had fallen asleep in the lobby of a Kentucky hotel. When a porter shook him in order to wake him up, Fane pulled a pistol and shot the porter 3 times. While the porter held him on the floor, the man repeatedly yelled, "Hooey!" He reportedly left the lobby and told a witness that he'd shot someone. The shooter was found guilty of manslaughter, but the conviction was reversed on appeal. Evidence that he had a lifelong history of sleepwalking and that he'd been sleep deprived before the attack was excluded from the first trial. In the 1920s, a Texas man named Bradley testified in court that he and his female friend were preparing for bed when he became suddenly fearful about an enemy who had made a threat against him. Fearing a secret attack, he went Betty-bye with a pistol under his pillow. Later, roused by a noise, he jumped up and fired shots. When he came to his senses, he found his girlfriend was dead at the foot of the bed. Bradley was convicted of murder, but the conviction was reversed on appeal. The jury hadn't been informed of the possibility that Bradley could have been in the dreamy grip of the Sandman and have fired the shots without volition while in a state of slumber. Take the case of Kenneth Parks. A young Canadian man was acquitted in the 1987 murder of his mother-in-law after using the sleepwalking defense. On the night of the death, he got out of bed, drove 14 miles to the house of his in-laws, with whom he was said to be close, and strangled his father-in-law until the man passed out. He bludgeoned his mother-in-law with a tire iron and stabbed them both with a kitchen knife. The woman died. The man barely survived. Parks then arrived at a police station. Police said he seemed confused about what had transpired, and they noted something odd. Parks appeared oblivious to the fact that he'd severed tendons in both his hands during the attack. That obliviousness to pain, along with other factors, including a strong family history of parasomnias, well, that led experts to testify that Parks had been sleepwalking during the attack. The jury, who obviously did not like their in-laws any more than Parks did, found him not guilty. In 1994, Michael Rickskers from Pennsylvania was convicted of the murder of his wife. He claimed he had accidentally killed her during a sleepwalking episode, which defense lawyers argued was provoked by a medical condition called, you guessed it, sleep apnea. Prosecutors presented an alternative explanation. His wife was planning to leave the schmuck and find a real man, so he shot her while she slept. Rickskers told police that he awoke to find a gun in his hand and his wife bleeding in bed beside him. He said that he might have dreamed about an intruder breaking in. The jury, who loved their spouses very much, found him guilty. And finally, Stephen Wrights, who killed his lover Eva, a married woman, during what was supposed to be a romantic Catalina Island getaway in 2001. He bludgeoned her head with a flower pot, leaving shards in her scalp, dislocated her arm, punctured her with a plastic fork, fractured her wrist, ribs, jaw, facial bones, and using a pocket knife, he left 3 gaping stab wounds on the back of her neck. Reitz told police that he had no recollection of the attack, though through flashbacks, he recalled believing that he was in a scuffle with a male intruder. Yep. Reitz, who had worked as a commercial fisherman, told police that the knife wounds on Weinfertner's neck were nearly identical to those that fishermen used to kill sharks. At trial, his parents testified that he had been a sleepwalker since childhood. Yeah. The jury did not believe this fish story and convicted Reitz Cracker of first-degree murder in 2004.
Good afternoon to all of you. This individual here, the defendant, Scott Falater, in a sense, baptized his wife, Carmela Falater, into the afterlife. Your name, sir?
I'm Philip Earl Keene, MD. I'm the chief medical examiner.
The medical examiner testified that Jarmila Falater had 44 stab wounds. Most of them were defensive wounds, but some were fatal.
Based on what the medical examiner told us about the stab wounds, we believe that once he had her near the pull pump, he actually put his left arm around her mouth so that she wouldn't scream. Then he loped his right arm around her shoulder and began to stab her. She knew what was going on around her, but she could not do anything about it.
He had absolutely no idea that this had...
Defense brings in 2 heavyweight sleep experts.
You have conducted an evaluation of Scott Falater in this case, have you not?
Yes, I have.
And have you reached an opinion regarding whether he was sleepwalking at the time he killed his wife?
It's my strong belief that that was the case.
Do you have an opinion whether Scott Falater was in a sleepwalking state when he stabbed his wife?
In my opinion, he was.
Scott Falater says he remembers none of this, but he and his sleepwalking experts speculate as to how this killing might have happened. Sleep deprived and stressed out from problems at work, Scott crashes into bed and then rising in a sleepwalking state.
He gets the idea, now I'm going to try to fix the pool pump again.
Jarmila comes and interrupts him in his sleepwalking state, which the experts will tell you is a dangerous thing to do.
He sees her not as his wife, but as some threat that his instinctual brain responds to while he's asleep.
And that is when Scott Falater attacks. Officers who searched the Falater home tell the jury how they spotted a clue that could easily have been overlooked.
What did you find?
A black plastic trash bag.
And anything in and around this black plastic trash bag?
A Tupperware container that had articles of clothing within them that looked odd, and then on closer examination I noticed that they had blood stain on them also.
And that's where they found the clothes that he had been wearing, apparently, when he stabbed her.
So what did you find inside of this Tupperware container once you opened it?
A honey-type knife, which was blood-stained.
That was the murder weapon. Voila, everything we're looking for. We just hit the jackpot.
Then the prosecutor calls his own sleepwalking expert to the stand, Dr. Mark Pressman.
In your experience, do sleepwalkers tend to conceal objects? Is that something that they do, generally speaking?
Sleepwalkers may misplace items, but to my knowledge, sleepwalkers never hide something. And these items were not only hidden, they were packaged neatly.
For the prosecution's sleepwalking expert, the most compelling evidence that Scott Falater was awake came after he stabbed his wife. He returned to Jarmila's body and dragged her over to the pool, held her under. A second act of violence.
The only way that sleep specialists think that violence can happen with a sleepwalker is that somebody confronts them, physically confronts them, gets in their way. That's clearly impossible on the second episode of violence.
He's got the weapon. He's got an eyewitness. There's just one thing he hasn't got, a motive. And suddenly, it seems to appear a phrase Scott Falater used, unforgivable sin.
Whatever this unforgivable sin is, he can't wait to be rid of her.
Scott Falater, who never denied that he killed Yarmila Falater, was convicted of first-degree murder. Jurors said Falater's claim of sleepwalking was hard to believe. The jury found Scott Falater guilty and sentenced him to life in prison without any possibility of parole. Falater, 43, showed no emotion when Superior Court Judge Ronald Reinstein sentenced him. He could have been sentenced to death or to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Now, let's hear from our resident retired homicide investigator, my husband, JR.
Why do we think Scott Falater is guilty? He changed his clothes that he used to commit the homicide. He was witness committing a second act of violence against his wife, and the state's sleep expert says that doesn't happen. He attempted to clean blood from his body after the homicide and did a poor job of that. He packaged and hid the knife and bloody clothes in his van, which again the sleep expert says someone might misplace an item, but they're not going to package and hide the items. And don't forget the final thing, it's just common sense, what makes sense. Does the story he's telling make sense? Absolutely not. It doesn't make any sense. What was Scott's plan? Obviously, we'll never know if his motive was money, just tired of his wife. But this is what we think the plan was. Scott waited till his kids went to sleep so there'd be no witnesses. So that way the only story would be the story he's going to tell the police later. So he stabs his wife to death. Then, just to make sure, puts her in the pool, makes sure that she's dead. He goes back in the house, takes off the bloody clothes, puts them in the Tupperware container with the knife, takes those items, hides it in his van, goes upstairs, washes himself off, doesn't do a very good job, puts on his pajama bottoms and his little white t-shirt, and he goes to bed. What he wants is he wants somebody else to find the body. Most people who kill a loved one especially want somebody else to find the body. They don't want to do it. But either way, the next day, his kids, neighbor, someone's going to see the body, or even he will come downstairs and claim he found the body. They'll claim it's an intruder did it, and then he gets away with murder. He's going to drive off to work in his van and get rid of the bloody clothing and the knife, and it's just going to be another unsolved homicide in Phoenix, Arizona. That's what we think his plan was.
Now that you've heard the facts and our opinion, we want to know what you think. Was he guilty of homicidal sleepwalking, or do you believe that's just a hogwash defense tactic? If you think he was guilty, did he deserve the death penalty, or do you think he should have gotten second-degree murder and been eligible for parole after 25 years? Please let us know in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching this video. If you have a case you'd like us to cover on this channel in future videos, let us know that too in the comments. And last but certainly not least, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more strange cases like this. And we will see you at the next case.